So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. It's still morning here. Can you do a little presentation of yourself so at least we can take it up from there? Thank you
Okay.
again for joining us. Hello and welcome to Obehi podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started with this episode.
Thank you very much for having me. Really pleased to be here and discuss my journey with you. So, just to tell you a bit about myself, my name is Shara Lewis Campbell, and I am the co-founder of Beauty and the Beast Publishing. I've been in the industry almost 30 years. I've been publishing way before I became an author of sorts. And to date, I have 7 books of my own out, and I have published 60 aspiring authors. And 16 of those have come from challenging backgrounds. So, we're very pleased.
Challenging background. What do
Yeah.
you mean by that? Can you share a
So,
little
people
word
that are not,
there?
yeah, certainly. So, typically, I would say a challenging background would be for somebody who probably has like a very unique story to tell, a very real story that would probably make a difference within society. At the moment, we have lots of people within the industry who come from typically from the background, so they were always going to be writers, etc. I didn't come from the industry. I didn't know I'm the first author in my entire family, and in order for me to become a published author, I had to create my own lane. Once I had done that, I realized that there was a niche in the market, and not only just with myself that could resonate with that, but also my business partner as well, which is the other co-founder who is unfortunately unable to be here today, which is Andrew Foster. And he heads our US base, and he looks after all the everything to do with the US out there. So he also wasn't from the wasn't from the industry either, and together we decided to set up this business, and it's been very successful for us. We've been in trading just over a year.
That's interesting. Of course, we're going to spend some time looking at that industry just now, looking at your book. But I would like to spend some few more minutes, seconds, if you like, about you. So tell me, as you were growing up, tell me a little bit about your background. So I'm
Okay,
interested because, in this podcast, we concentrate on the people. We concentrate
sure.
on your story because your story for us
Mhm.
is important. So tell us about the young you growing up.
Okay, so the young me growing up started in the very humble parts of Birmingham, which is like the largest city in the UK. And I was born in a very small place called Small Heath, hence the pun. And from what I can recall and from what my parents have told me, I as soon after I was born, within a matter of weeks, we moved to London, and the family has very much been here ever since. So London has been our base. I will say this: none of my parents actually live in the UK, so it's just myself and a few siblings that are here still. They've all returned to their respective countries or wherever they wanted to be in life, and we're still here. So it was a very humble beginning for me. I would say that it was slightly different, non-traditional in the sense that both of my parents are mixed race. So I have one parent who was born in Jamaica and also of mixed heritage with an Asian background. And she was one of 15 children. That was my mum. And she was made to come to the UK when she was just 5 years old. So that would have been a massive turning point and a huge sort of move in her own journey. My father was born in the UK, but to parents that were not from the UK. So his mum is Irish, and my late grandfather was Nigerian. So just to show you that we have a sort of like mix of cross cultures. And here I am today.
You are the whole world sum up together, so you will have
That's right.
a connection everywhere. That is really very rich as it were, no?
Yes, I think
Yesterday I
so. I
was,
mean,
yeah,
go ahead.
please, I'm listening to you.
No, you go ahead.
No, yesterday I was listening to a documentary that was looking at the earlier European history, the Asian history as it were, or ancient world, if you want to call it like that. No, these days people look at racism, look at discrimination as if the people in the past they didn't have time to have to deal with issues like this. Especially when you look at the fact that, say maybe like European and Africa will be engaging for several thousands of years. So it become very important to even ask the question then. So how did the people even have to deal with this complexity of issue as it is then? Or maybe it wasn't really an issue. It wasn't a problem. They look at it as opportunity. Because like you now, you have a background coming from different angle. One can look at it as a problem. For another person, that is opportunity. I look at this as opportunity because I mean you have connection to different angle. So I don't know if that is how you look at it also.
I do still feel like, listening to my parents' stories and my grandparents' stories, the element of racism has always been present. When my grandparents came to this country, there were notices on the doors that saying, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. So they were affected by all of those things. When my grandmother, who was an Irish native, came to this country, there was no opportunities for her. So the opportunities were very slim. As time has gone on and people have developed better attitudes, and I think probably with the Windrush, not so much of late, but when it was first devised and people came over from that generation, I think there was probably more of a welcome. But I think as time has gone on, and especially probably since the pandemic and before then, when we sort of became part of the European nation, etc., I think that heightened racism and prejudice then. I would also say as well, like in most recent times, the rest of the world does need to catch up somewhat in terms of racism and prejudice, because as you are speaking to me here in the UK, had this been pre-2020, from 2016 until 2020, I had been living in Australia. So that was my base. And I experienced a lot of racism and prejudice there. And I wrote about those things. I mean, my first experience of being in Australia penned my first published book, because I felt compelled to write about those things. But what was important to me is the thing that you mentioned about opportunity. I have been able to turn those negative experiences around into positive experiences. So in terms of opportunities, I've created opportunities from the situations or circumstances that have, moved me, as it were, and created my own lane.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And
Thank
for
you.
us, the diaspora, we really need to tap into that. I think we have a lot of opportunity. I was interviewing also a journalist in Vatican a couple of days ago, and this was what we were talking about, particularly from the point of view of us taking advantage of where we are and try to shape our narration because it is very important. All right, we are moving
Yes.
to an even more interesting part of the conversation now, which is your book writing, and later we'll talk about your book publishing. So, how did you get started into book publishing? What were the things that influenced you into taking a line in it? Because you could have been in some other area. So, why book writing to start with?
By book writing, I'd always wanted to be an author as long as I can remember, as a child. I mean, talking about my first experience in school, I always wanted to be an author. I don't know why. Probably I would put it down really mainly to my reading. I'm a very quick reader, and I read very quickly with understanding. So that's probably one of the few gifts and talents that I would assign to myself. My stepfather, who was the only person who ever encouraged me throughout my career and life, really, in terms of my writing and so on, he recognized that I had this talent. And, I could get through, irrespective of how thick the books were, as long as I didn't have any other duties as a child or responsibility, I could get through maybe about 3 or 4 books a day, and be able to recite that back to him, etc. So I was always very keen in literature and wanting to write and read. I think reading would have been more of my passion rather than writing back then. But English has always been a very strong subject for me. I did extremely well in it. From what I can remember throughout my entire education, whenever I wrote something, whether it be in elementary, primary, secondary, and later on, even after that, anything that I wrote, which was like say maybe a fictional piece or a non-fictional piece, an essay or a story or anything like that, would always be, or maybe a part of it, but normally would be the case that the tutor or the lecturer would read my work aloud, in a public forum to the rest of the class, etc. So that sort of encouraged me. And when I was doing my A-level English, I remember having turned in an essay, which was like a story we had to write. And my daughter was very young at that time. She was like newborn and within the first year, and I was off with her because she hadn't been very well. And I'd written the story and sent it in. And I remember I was still off with her within the week. And a couple of days later, the lecturer turned up at my house and, wanted to speak to me about my piece and was really encouraging about becoming an author. But again, back then, that was I had no connections within the industry. I didn't know how to go about these things, and life just really took over. But it's always been an interest. And back in between 2009 and 2013, I decided that I would go and take a second degree. After my father had been badgering me about it every day for 10 years to, take this English degree. And so just to keep the peace, I did it. And it was the best thing I ever did. Whilst I was taking the degree, I realized probably within the first year that I was going to actually use this rather than my first degree, which I didn't use at all. And I said I was definitely going to use this, and I was going to transfer these skills into being an author. Within 2 years of being and studying, I was given the opportunity to work as a sub-editor for a local magazine, and that's how the publishing started. So I actually became a publisher before I became a publisher before I became a writer, and certainly an author. But I had published my own work a few times within this magazine on a very small scale. I was quite a shy and retired writer because I didn't come from the industry, so I wasn't too keen to be ridiculed or have my work sort of poked at, etc. So I published a few times. I would say it was about 3 or 4 times in this magazine that I was editing for, and I think I worked there for about 2 years prior to leaving, and just before I left to embark on this journey full time, I was editor-in-chief for that magazine, which gave me all the editing and publishing skills that I needed.
I have a lot I'm going to have to ask you there relating to publishing because,
Sure.
like I said before, our demographic need is our community need it. I mean, the African diaspora, we need a lot of feet, no? You look at the
Yes.
life of Marcus Garvey. One of the area where he managed to tap more into the community was publishing. No,
Mhm.
it is very important that we pen down what we are thinking in our head. No, of course, because that is the way we communicate. It is very important. But before we get there, just now, I'm interested in what kind of book were you even reading? Which were the book? Was there any type of book, or were you having some certain topic that were more interesting for you as you were beginning to love reading?
To be honest with you, there's a vast majority of a wide range of books that were available to me. I liked autobiographies where I could really get to learn more about a person, or anything that was non-fictional. And just going back to the point that you made as well regarding Marcus Garvey, it's such an important point that you raised there, and something that a message that I like to convey regarding publishers and writers and authors of that type, because that's the reason why I'm even in this business. It's because of people like the people you mentioned, Marcus Garvey, Nelson Mandela, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, also other people as well, like Nadine Gordimer, who was a white South African writer. And, whilst those people may have experienced some sort of censorship, I do believe that writers that come after them have a great onus to write the truth, because especially on behalf of people that have opened the doors for us in terms of their censorship, where they could have either been killed or have been imprisoned or have had their books banned or burnt or worse. If you look at places like North Korea, where this is still very much the regime, etc. I think it's very important that the writers that are currently writing today that are in the industry are writing authentically and are writing realistically and are telling true stories.
That's very interesting. So you happen to meet Nelson Mandela. What circumstances for that? Do you want to say anything about it?
Just to say that it was a very fleeting experience. When he came to London on on the first visit, he stopped in at Brixton, and my daughter would attend a nursery there. And on the day that he arrived, I was with my daughter because they were going to sort of be there as part of the celebrations. And out of all the thousands and millions of people that were there, I'll say thousands, there was quite a few of us that were there. He spotted my daughter and came over and spoke to us. So, and it was just an acknowledgement. But I mean, of all the people that was there, to think that he had spotted us, I mean, it's just absolutely surreal and a moment that I will never ever forget. I will also say as well that when I was younger, I've met other considerable people, such as Bob Marley, but I was too young to know, to be able to expand any more on those meetings.
That's interesting. The other day, that should be like 3 weeks ago now, I think, I interviewed a British author. Her name is Catherine Fletcher, who wrote a book about the Black Prince of Florence, Alessandro de Medici. So the conversation was really very long that we had here in this podcast. And at a point, I enjoy what Catherine was saying, relating to the writing of history. Which means there is a lot that goes into it, a lot of digging, it also means a lot of sacrifices sometimes. Of course, we know historians in the past who have had to lose their life because they reported what the society didn't want to hear. Because truth is very expensive sometimes, no? Then I was also telling her during the conversation that this is why I think that African people should never expect the European to tell their story, because it is not possible, because there is too much sacrifice involved in it, and there is too much emotion in it. So I think it would be wrong for Africans to expect other people to tell their story, because you are going to have to dig it out yourself. You're going to have to shape the narration yourself. You're going to have to add all the flavor according to your sensibility to it. That is why I also like the conversation that I'm having with you just now, because it is in the area that is very sensitive. Yes, please go.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I would also say that there are other people, such as Nadine Gordimer, who was central, to shaping apartheid, and she was a white South African. And to be fair, I don't know how apartheid would have been today without her input, because to be fair, at that time, she would have been taken probably more seriously as a white writer than a Black writer at that time. It would have had different connotations. And even though her books may have been banned and she would have gone through some hardship, at the end of the day, she was still under the white privilege. So for her to take ownership of that and responsibility for that and tell the truth, no matter how ugly it may appear, was a huge, huge sacrifice on her part and a huge benefit to society. And, for those reasons, I suppose that she received her Pulitzer Booker Prize winner and received that award, as a result. So, other authors are probably not aware of this, but it's because of those controversial writings, which has probably paved the way for authors like myself to be able to be successful within the industry today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much for pointing out that is very important. No, it is true that we usually do not have time to analyze a story, so we go by approximation. No? That is what we can do, because if we were to take out even one word, it would take more than a dictionary to explain it. No, but in the overall statement, it simply means that we do not expect other people to tell our story, because it is not possible to do that. And like I said before, a lot of emotion is involved in it. Of course, that doesn't mean that there are no Europeans who can make a significant contribution to the telling of African story. But that is too small.
They can't tell the true story. Yeah,
exactly. It's too much of an involvement. So The only
Well,
people
they'd
that
have
can.
to have the experience,
Mhm,
of being, held to apartheid and going through some of these enslavements. They
mhm.
would need to be privy to that, whereas they weren't really. They were more witnesses, and involved more or less in the apartheid by being separated, rather than actually being a victim of it. But I suppose in a way we all were victims of it, by not having that interaction together where blacks and whites couldn't mix, just like we've seen, in previous histories in America, history states there, when they had the separations, etc. And even in this country, back in the 50s, etc. And things have obviously evolved. But like you quite rightly said, there is a lot of emotion. And I think even for maybe Black people, it's not so much that we want to go over what's happened to us in history, but we want it acknowledged, and we want it respected, more so.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's not about unturning the history, but it's
No.
just making sure that it is balanced. I think I said
Yeah.
it a number of times with K3. It is very important that the story we tell is balanced. But that is a very fine line that we can trade depending on our sensibility also, because how are you going to be able to tell a story that is balanced? Because a history is just a point of view in most of the cases, no? There is
Yeah.
no. I repeat again, look at the United States, for example, how many billions of dollars is spent on Hollywood for the telling of the American story. That is an
Yeah.
investment. You don't
Mm.
expect America to be telling the Indian story. It is not,
Yeah.
it doesn't work because a lot, I repeat again, a lot is involved in it, no? So the Indian need to tell their story. The
Yeah.
Asian, the Chinese need to tell their story. Currently, there is war in Ukraine. You don't expect BBC to be telling the Russian version of the story. It just doesn't work. It is not
No.
possible. If we
Mm.
want to know what is the point of view of the Russian, we need to listen to the Russians. That is just the way it is. All
Mm-hmm.
right, now coming back to a section that I found very interesting is what is your storyline actually mainly concentrating on? I mean, what is dominating your narration in your book writing?
Okay, so with my book writing, I like to write about experience. I'm a staunch supporter of social restorative justice. So I like to see, I'm in the, I'd like to see more of that, where a fairer and just society. So I'm very keen to write about those things. Outside of that as well, I would also say that humanitarian issues really do interest me, and as well as sort of just being kind to people, and having a kind of more tolerance for society. We need to change the narrative, and do more collective working. So I'm very open to that. As I mentioned to you as well, having come being made up of at least 4 different cultures that I'm aware of, it's something that I would like to sort of spread that word around and make society a more universal place, where we are not looking at our differences, but we are using our differences to create a common goal, as it were.
All right, I like that approach. That is very interesting because that is what really make the world. That should make the world more beautiful because, like the
Yeah,
ancient people did, it made their world more cosmopolitan, more beautiful as it were.
yeah,
It wasn't really about where you were coming from. If you could do the job, then you are, and you really demonstrate that you can do it, then you could take it. The Roman did it, the Greek did it, the Egyptian did it. And to a certain extent, we tend to do it, but we don't do it enough. There is too much of, we look at you because you look like this. Anyway, that shouldn't be really the issue. So, looking at that as a possibility that we have, how do we really go about it? Try to downgrade our wall, the wall that separates or reduce it a little bit and begin to look at the people that are inside those walls. I mean, how do we make it more of a norm rather than an exception?
I think we need to change our attitudes to a lot of things. And I think that with the pandemic that we've just had, the one thing that we were all able to do when we had that period that we were in lockdown and imprisoned inside our own homes effectively, we would have felt no different than anyone being in prison or anything like that. So, within those confines, I think there was one thing that we all did was take a good hard look at ourselves and looked at our environments to see what we could do to improve on that. So a lot of people did a lot of inner work, in soul searching, etc., looking at where they needed to make change and where they needed to make improvements within their own lives. Other people looked at the state of their homes and their environment in the physical sense and made changes there, whether it be redecorating, etc. It was all about this renewed experience. And I think for us as a society, especially within the Black culture, so that would be wherever you are, where you see yourself as a Black person, I think the first thing to do is to recognize that we are a broken society, or we are a broken demographic in the fact that we are all very separated. Also, as well, we have this perception that we've got to be independent and we've got to be this, and it's all about being the independent Black woman or whatever. But I don't agree with that notion, to be honest. And it's taken me a long time to feel this way, but I've spent a lot of time trying to be independent. And the more I've tried is the more I've found myself collective working, because collective working is the way forward. Doing something on your own is only going to ever achieve a certain amount of results, if any, and it's always going to be very, very limited. I think in our society, we need to fix our own problems in terms of learning to embrace and accept each other more. Maybe it's because of our history and our background that has kept us all very divided and separate from one another. We seem to, as a demographic, seem to be more open to working, or seem to be more distrust within our own communities. And I put that down to our history, where we all came from the one place and then we were all enslaved and sent to various other places, may have added to that way of thinking, where we're always suspicious and we're always, not so trustworthy, of people that are like ourselves. However, we are very open to showing that trustworthiness to other cultures, outside. And there's nothing wrong with that. The world is about relationships, but at the same time, we need to get a grip on our own culture and learn to put aside the histories of what has happened, not to forget about them, but to try to move on from them, because to live in them, everybody knows that you cannot achieve anything by living in the past. You have to move on at some point. So we have to learn to forgive ourselves, and then move with the best way forward, instead of, doing our best to kind of shut down the next person, or, not encourage or embrace that person with what they're trying to do. There is no harm if you see something, that somebody else is producing, and it appeals to you, then invest in it. There's nothing wrong with you telling someone, "Oh, I really like what you're doing here," or being supportive, and that's what it's about. That is what's going to make the world a better place. It's that kind of engagement rather than not saying anything, and not engaging.
That is absolutely wonderful. That is so interesting. I love it so much. Thank you for that. I really find it very interesting because I feel the same way too, that we need more of collaboration. That is the only thing that is going to save us. Because when you go alone, you are going to get lost. It's the only
Yeah,
guarantee that is going to happen. But when you go together, even though something happened to you, other people will carry your story on. And that is basically how we survive. That is how cultures survive. Because as a human being, as an individual, for how long are you going to live? 100 years? At 100,
exactly.
you are basically not really productive as it were, no? So if everything is around you, that is the end of the story. So
Yes.
we must
And then
learn to stand on the shoulder of other people, and when it gets to our turn, allow other people to stand also on our shoulder. That is how we
that's
take
right.
the story on.
I
All
agree.
right.
And I think if we
Yeah.
all do things from a place of love and start from there, the world will be a better place altogether.
Looking at that, looking at the scenario that you have painted for us, that you have created, do you see any difference from maybe when you were much younger in UK and today you are an adult, you are a parent? Do you see any difference in this broken society, this broken demography, this broken culture? How do you
Yeah,
make
I
the
do.
comparison?
I do. I don't. I don't see so much in my generation, but the upcoming generations, it's very, very apparent. They don't have this, the children being brought up. I mean, you mentioned I was a parent, and that's correct. But I'm also a grandparent, and that I struggle with even more. Society is a lot harsher than it used to be. It's a lot more hateful. People seem to be more discouraged. In the UK here, when I was growing up, there was lots of there was play centres, there was support, there were children playing together. Children used to play outside their homes. These days, there's not so much of that. We're told to take our kids off the streets. If there's more than two in a group, two children in the group, they're seen as a gang. And there's all this negative sort of connotations, and which concerns me for my grandchildren. And I would like to think that, by the time that, I'm no longer here, that the world has somewhat done a 360 and, and has recognized its mistakes and becomes a better place so that my grandchildren can survive and thrive in it.
Thank you so much for that. All right, now looking at you as a parent, as a grandparent, and looking at you as you were growing up, and looking at your trajectory, what would you like to say in terms of maybe the support? Because the children, they need a kind of guidance, a kind of they need to figure out how to be in this world, no?
Sure.
So, what kind of support do you think parents should give to their children in terms of trying to find their voice in this world?
Well, first and foremost, we need communities. We need our communities back. Those have been broken down. You know, you'll find that we're all living in a very tight space, and we need to have that appreciation for others in their tight space as well. So for instance, it's the communities that should be growing children, as they're a part of it. And there's not so much of that going on these days. It all seems to have been, all that support seems to have been withdrawn. And I also think as well, when I was younger, they used to, all the families used to get together, we used to all eat and do things, and socialize together, every day, every week. Not so much here these days. Everything's very broken. The children don't relate to their parents. Parents don't relate to their children. And there's a lot more influences around as well. You'll find that with social media, the invention of social media, the propaganda from mainstream media, as well as there seems to be very little support from our current government in terms of the youth, and in terms of the youth from sort of local environments as well. People who are working class or the poor, seems to be very little support being offered to them. So what happens there is, without them getting that support, they grow up to be very angry children, and feel that they find their own ways of finding justice, which may not be helpful for society or for themselves and their families. We need to change that narrative. We all need to take ownership, for the current state of affairs in this country and around the world. And we all need to be doing what we can to make it a better place.
Is there a kind of explanation of how we get to where we are today? Because you talked of the past that was beautiful, as it were, no? And
it had problems. It
yeah,
wasn't ideal, but it was a lot better than what we have today. People more together. You would see sort of grandparents and parents, all involved, with the children, etc. It seems to me now that, especially, I wouldn't say especially, but since the pandemic mainly, everyone's being told to keep to yourselves, stay in your own home, and be careful of how you're intermingling with other people. What has that done? That's helped to further separate society, has it? And, and since the war, if you've noticed, there is no more COVID, I mean, I know people, that's instantly vanished, and I know of people that have never had the vaccination, and we found out recently that it doesn't work anyway. So, the majority of the country have offered their arms up, to be vaccinated, to lessen the risk to other people. But, we've all since learned that whether you have it or not, you are still subject to this, we need to figure some things out, and we need, agencies and the media, mainstream media as well, need to take some responsibility, because they spin the narrative that they want to spin, when it suits them. We just need to have more cohesion, because some of the messages that are being translated across our screen, are probably not some of the best representations.
All right. Some of the messages on our screen are not the best representation in some
Yeah.
cases. Fine. Now, it means that all of us then have a responsibility at this point, because now there is a social media, there is a possibility of making a contribution. There are possibility like yours, which is in the book publishing. We are going to go just now. Is there something that we can do as individual to contribute to this information that we want to consume? Because I think a lot of people spend too much time consuming, not producing, because they leave that job to other people to do. And at the end, we are going to have to complain that they didn't do a good job. But what about you that spend all the
Yeah.
time just scrolling on Facebook? Couldn't you have done something, just saying your own? Like, how do you see the world? Because how long do you think you are going to live in this world that you don't you also think? Like, don't you also have a point of view? Like, can't you also sing? If you cannot sing, can't you dance? I mean, how do you see the
Well,
responsibility of the ordinary people in this information creation and consumption?
I think, like anybody, I would say the best way, it's not even so much about having a talent, as it were. I mean, if you are naturally gifted at something, I would find a way of displaying that and presenting that to the world, and finding a way to get paid from it, so that you can do it long term, and make a real difference. It doesn't always have to be a monetary gain. You can do things with a missionary approach, that will also bring in funds thereafter. But I also feel as well that we just have a responsibility to do the right thing, and we all know what that consists of. And it means to do anything that isn't the wrong thing. So anything that's opposite of wrong, should be considered. So, for instance, whereas I write, I have a responsibility to source writers that are not from the industry, but that want to join the industry and have a story to tell. And it's my responsibility to publish that person or teach them the skills, so that they can do this for themselves as a career. And that's what I think that in our business is different from other publishers, whether it be traditional or independent. They do it for a monetary gain. We do it because we want them to be able to spread the word about what they do, teach these skills to somebody else, because that helps to create our legacy. And we're a part of theirs as well. And I also feel as well, with these real stories, it gives them an opportunity to change society. For instance, our second publication, which was my business partners, his book is 2020 Sublimes, is now taught as part of the national curriculum in Georgia State University. You never know the difference that these publications are going to make to people. They reduce crime, they bring about positivity, they encourage other people. There's lots of things that a real book can offer.
Thank you so much for that. All right, now we are moving into the publishing. First of all, tell us about the image that we are seeing at your background. I seem to be seeing something there. Tell us something about that, then we are moving to the publishing.
So this is a background screen. I suppose you would use them within a Zoom meeting like we're having here, or for any reason why you might want to sort of display your work. So as well as this is one of the last things that we would do with the book, and we would leaf through it. If it was a hard copy, we would leaf through the hard copy. And so that's just a depiction of that there. And it signifies that we are in the book business. As well as in the book business, we also offer media services as well. And there's a couple of books there in the background with our logo on it. It's a new logo for us as well.
All right, thank you for that. At least those that are seeing it, they know what it is now.
Yeah.
Okay, Beauty and the Beast Publishing. Tell us about it.
Okay, so Beauty and the Beast Publishing was born in December of 2020. As I stated, I had met with my business partner, who comes from a very challenging background, and I published we published a novelty publication together, which was a poetry book. And from there, we decided that we wanted to continue working because from not knowing each other, we were complete strangers, obviously, before we met. And under the strange circumstances in which we did meet, we realized that we had a really good formula. Within the space of 2 weeks, we had our book down, our book cover done, and we were ready to publish, So we realized we had a really good formula together. And from there, we decided that, we were both not typically from the industry. And we wanted to see more authors like us. We knew that when we were setting up our business, that there were other authors that were also experiencing the hardships that we had in coming into the industry and becoming published authors. So, and we wanted to go one step further with that, not only just making them authors, but we wanted to offer them a lifetime service so that they could continue this in their own careers, whether it just be as an author, or if they wanted to learn about the publishing side of things, they could come via the academy that we have and learn all of those skills, as well as publish a book within 12 weeks.
Oh, right. Now, a new author come to meet you because maybe he or she has written a book but doesn't know how to get it out to the world. How do you help this person?
Okay, so we would obviously consult with them, we'd meet with them, we'd try to find out what their objectives are in terms of their market, their audience, what they plan to do with the book. And then from there, we would consult with them and give them sort of tips and knowledge of what we have used that has worked for us in being able to publicly promote and market their books.
I've heard recently, maybe you have also heard too, of people complaining that readership have reduced a lot, that people don't read anymore. Why are you even in the book industry? You should be looking to do something else, no? I don't know if you have heard something like that. So what is your reaction?
I don't know if I agree with that. I suppose each person, there are some people that don't read. There are some people that listen to audio. So could it be that readership has gone to audio and that people are more listening to narration rather than reading for themselves? So that could be a thing. Audio book sales has really come up loads. So whereas people have got very busy, owing to, various things, a pandemic, etc., people probably don't have as much time to read, but you can set aside time to do it. And if not, there are other ways, like in terms of the audio side of things. And also as well, lots of books have turned into TV movies, etc. So people tend to kind of read those, which is I would say, a watered down version of getting to understand a story. But I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I would just say that people probably do it differently now. But I would say this: the only way to learn something is to read.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Of course, people need to understand that things are always changing. In fact, there is a saying that this world not really is lost. Things always change, no? We only transform things, and we even transform ourselves. And so if you don't like to take a book and start turning pages, you can still listen in audio.
And it's probably the most, I would say, even as a writer, it's probably the most important job to have, within society, because you change narrative, and so forth. So yes, very important skill to have.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, how do we get people into this business of writing, of documentation? I want to repeat again that in our demography, which is the African diaspora or Africans as it were, it is very important for us for many reasons, but let's point out a few things. You left your home country, looking at the first generation now. You have come to the West, for example, which is the typical case. You have lived all your life here, and you're probably going to die here for most people, no? Who is going to tell your story? You think you don't have experience? You have gathered enough experience that can be very interesting for people to hear or listen or read on on paper. But of course, the mainstream media are not interested in your story, except maybe you go and kill somebody, or you do a kind of Maradona job, or you do extraordinary thing. Then your name will come out on paper. But for the average person, whom I believe that their story is equally important, how do we get them to be interested in telling their story?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that for every author, they have a responsibility. How publicly available their book is, or how many sales they made, or how many people read their book, is really down to the author to pass on that information. It's really their area of responsibility to ensure that people are aware of their book. So they can do that in a variety of ways, whether it be advertising, or whether it be just through word of mouth or social media, and it's consistency as well. It doesn't matter how your book is going to be here. Once it's out in the public domain, whether you are here or not, that book is still out there. It will still sell. And I think, just like with anything really, you tend to find that probably after people are no longer with us, like looking at people like Shakespeare, who's probably one of the most prolific writers of around the world. He's taught everywhere or mentioned everywhere. But he didn't become very famous until after his passing. So it's not as if nobody will read the book. But whilst you are alive and, are able to inform people about your book, you have a duty and an onus to do so. By spreading the word.
Yeah. You have a duty to do so. A duty to yourself and also the generation that are going to come after you.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. It's very interesting. Okay, now let's look at the capability. Because everybody have story to tell. In fact, we specifically state here that everyone has a story to share. But not everybody know how to share. Now, you made mention of outsourcing before. Now, let's leave that aside. We'll come to that later. You made mention of academy, something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Is there a way that you teach people how to write, how to narrate their story? Tell me about that.
Yes, there is. I mean, there is a way. I would say to come through the academy to find out. But basically, over the course of 12 weeks, we show you how to turn a blank page into a very popular, best-selling book. So we give you all the skills, to learn how to write, to learn how to do it quickly so you can get the book done. Sometimes it can take people up to a year, I've understood. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people just put out one book a year. But you can write a book. We can show you ways of how to write them a lot quicker than that. Within a matter of weeks. If we can even show you how to write a book in a weekend if you really need to. So we can give you all those skills. We can show you how to edit your piece, how to proofread, how to design covers, book covers, illustrations, and how to market and advertise a book as well. But you would need to be a part of our academy for us to show you those skills.
All right, now let's look at the people that are coming from raw state now. Those who probably have something upstairs but do not know how to do it. Now, say maybe they even have the desire. So the question now is the problem. So what do they complain to you that is stopping them from writing their book so that you help them at the end of the day?
I think it's a lack of experience, a lack of confidence maybe. Like myself, there was only one person that ever encouraged me to do what I'm doing today. And, so it could be just by those people not being in the right, or not having the right industry knowledge or knowing who to approach within the industry. Sometimes they found that they have written and they get frustrated. But I would encourage people to write every day, in order to sort of meet their ambitions in terms of wanting to be an author. Just write every day. It doesn't have to be, when you write, it doesn't have to be perfect. But obviously by the time it's published, it would be.
With the internet, with the help of internet, of course, I know that a lot of people waste their time on the internet looking for fancy things to look at just to pass time, no? But the internet is also a very huge opportunity for us, no? In that you can connect with people, you can engage with people. You and I, we never met before, no? We just exchange contact. Now we are talking, no?
Yeah.
Who know what usually happens that people can actually do a lot of things on the internet in terms of business and engagement in a healthy and positive way. How do you think people like that are just starting out can take advantage of the internet to help themselves become published authors? I mean, what value are out there on the internet to tap into?
Well, I think that, well, first, probably one of the best things they could do is to contact us, Beauty and the Beast Publishing, because as well as the fact that we're a smaller company on our own, we are affiliated with some of the largest writing groups around the world. So probably by contacting us, we'd be able to put you in contact with those groups as well, so that you can help to raise your profile and awareness of your books, as well as your skills as a writer. So it would help in terms of collaboration, etc. So yeah, that would probably be one of the best ways. And also just familiarizing yourself with other people that are similar to you from other maybe social media, etc., being a part of various groups, writing groups, etc., so that you can, share experiences and learn from each other.
Do you think that there are certain capability that one need to have to start a book project? Like, okay, by that I mean academic qualification. You need to have certain degree before you can be a book author. Can you say anything
Definitely
about that?
not. Definitely not. I published several times before I got my second degree, but I would say that it would help. If you were qualified, then you wouldn't need as much support, because you'd be able to go away and do this independently. But if you didn't, then coming to somewhere like Beauty and the Beast Publishing, or being a part of our academy, which is a snazzy writing academy, would be able to assist you with that, in terms of gaining the skills and expertise in order to do this for yourself.
All right. Now, looking at it from the point of view of business, people who want to make money creating content, what do you want to say about outsourcing? Say maybe, for example, somebody have a business model that he's not a writer. He doesn't want to be a writer, but he still want to make money creating content, because I sort of find it that is in line with what you are doing. How can a person like that get started?
Well, it's very possible. I mean, to be honest, you would probably need to have some experience about various issues and decide on what sort of content and who you would want to supply that to. If you felt that your work was very aligned to a particular company, then you could approach them direct and show them samples of your work, or request a meeting, etc. In our business, as well as the fact that we are book publishers and media creatives as well, we also supply content as well to other businesses, and we receive a good income from doing so.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. No, say maybe a company want to contact you for content. I don't know. Of course, it depends on how much you want to say about that. How does it usually work? Like, they call you, they tell you, do this for us, or tell us about it. Like, a company want to benefit from your service to create content for them.
Sure. So they could find us available on any major social media. We're also on Fiverr, Freelancer, and the likes. But the best thing I would advise anyone to do is to contact us via the website, or if you see us on any of the social media pages, you can contact us via there. And then they would need to reach out to us and tell us what their requirements are. And then we would have a meeting and a general discussion to see where we maybe would be able to fit within their expectations, and hopefully we could work out a way of how we'd be able to provide content for them. At the moment, as a business, I believe that we provide content to at least 6 other organizations at the moment, and that's growing.
As a business model, creating content for people and earning money from it, how easy is it to even run? Or say maybe some other persons are interested in starting a business like that. How simple is it? How complex it is?
It's as easy as you want it to be. So, for instance, I would say you would need to probably, develop some sort of expertise in this area, so that. So I would say, if you've never done it before and you're doing it for the first, whatever, you probably want to offer some of your services voluntarily, so that you can get yourself out there. Other companies that wouldn't really take you on if you don't have the experience to do so. Just your desire would not be enough. And I started with desire, sort of brought me into this business. But you have to start from somewhere. So you would probably start providing content, maybe for smaller companies, or maybe not ideally the company you would want to create for you. And even if you did want to supply, I don't know, say you wanted to supply content to Google, for instance, as an example, you probably would find that you would be best served supplying this content and offering it on a volunteer basis for a while, and probably take on, I don't know, contact some other magazines and editorials and offer them the same service as well, so that you can build a profile. And then once you've done that, then you can start charging for it. But I would say initially, get yourself a profile on some of these other forums, such as Fiverr and Freelancer, and offer those services to other companies, to other potential companies, and offer very competitive rates, and more than likely you will get the work.
This is very important. Of course, we are moving towards the end of the conversation just now, but I want to really single out that this one is very important, because people need to understand that, yes, you can do it. It doesn't mean that you must have a certain qualification from a certain university before you can do it. And looking at our demography, looking at the African diaspora, for example, there are a lot of people, for example, who maybe came from Africa with qualification, but getting to Europe, because they are European resident, where they are staying doesn't have a kind of a good treaty, their qualification is useless. So the only job they can do here is just do cleaning and things like that. But these are people that are maybe that be teacher, or they have BSc. They are qualified. They have undergo training, but they can never use their qualification. So to those kind of people who will quickly become parents and therefore have all these difficulty that they are going to be facing every day, you know, it is not difficult to find a lot of depression in the community, but we know where it is coming from. So the question now is that it is also possible for this kind of people to start something of their own. So that is why I was trying to sort of ask you there
Yeah, of
what they
course.
can do. Because
Yeah.
maybe what you need is just a computer. You can start to learn something, and you can start to do something for yourself, because they are not useless.
No, of course not. And they have a very valuable contribution to make. I mean, I would say that anybody who was in Africa, and just in the example you provided, if you were in Africa and you came to the UK or any other country, you've got a great story to tell. You know, most recently, we published someone who started they were living in the Middle East, and they relocated to Australia. And so they had a really prolific story to a journey to write about and discuss. And they told their story. And the book is doing extremely well. And I think for anybody, not just for somebody who was from that country and then went to Australia, but for anybody who's doing a big move like that, like I wish that book was out before I went to Australia. You know, I could have really benefited from it and probably wouldn't have suffered as much hardship. So this is why it's really important for people to tell their stories, you know. So before you even make a decision on something, you can have a look to see if there is a narrative that's already produced, you know, regarding this, and which is a real life story that you can probably resonate or relate to, because you may either come upon or have had that experience.
All right. Now, starting this business or working in this business for a long time, what are the things that are motivating you, that are helping you to go on despite the challenges? So tell us about that.
So I think that every day I'm motivated because of the demographic that I work with. You know, they all come from very challenging backgrounds, and so there is a responsibility for that demographic. So that keeps me motivated. As I mentioned to you before as well, that I would like to just see a fairer and just society for, you know, upcoming generations, especially within my own family and my grandchildren, etc. So I would like to see a fair and just place for them to grow up in. Those are the things that keep me motivated.
Thank you so much for that. All right. We really have touched different angles here. Though, of course, there are some other things I would have also like to ask you, but that is where we are going to cut it today. Otherwise, we're going to stay here forever. Usually, I would ask my guests to conclude the conversation in their own way, because, you know, perhaps there are something you wanted to say that I didn't ask you, because I don't have any possibility of knowing everything you want to say, you know. So this is
Sure.
the last chance. Is there anything that you want to add to the conversation to conclude it? Please go ahead.
Yeah. I would just like to say that anybody who is interested in writing a book, or if they want to write a movie, or if they want to, produce a movie or anything like that, or anything that's creative within that genre, please reach out to us. Our speciality is producing and publishing aspiring authors. And we, as I mentioned before, we always also have an academy that you can come through. We offer our services on a lifetime basis as well. So as long as we're in business, you always have access to us. We have over 20 years within the experience within the industry as well. And we'd be very keen to work with you.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure on my part.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewafo. Thank you so much for listening and talk to you in the next episode.